So explain to some of my listeners, Bill, that maybe they understand what the CPI is, right? The Consumer Price Index, and they understand that the CPI is supposed to be this objective macroeconomic gauge as to whether or not we are experiencing inflation or not. So they turn on the TV, they see the CPI is up 1.5%. Meanwhile, they're paying twice for a cup of coffee what they paid 3 years ago. The two things don't gel. Explain to somebody
Correct.
that might not understand hedonics and all of these things exactly why the CPI fails to capture the real rate of inflation.
Okay. I'll give you the 20,000 foot level view. If anyone really cares, I wrote a book in 2008 called Greenspan's Bubbles: The Age of Ignorance of the Federal Reserve, and there's a piece of one chapter where I go into this in some detail, but I'm not trying to plug the book because I don't care if anyone buys it, but if anyone cares to read about it, it's all in there. So I think probably one of the more mind-boggling sleights of hand is hedonic adjustments. What that means is everybody's familiar with the improvement in their and the increase in power of their cell phone since we had flip-ups, or their laptop, or their desktop. And everyone can see that as technology advances, things get better, and oftentimes the price stays the same, which means you're getting more for your buck. But that's the nature of technology. I mean, when horse-drawn plows were replaced with mechanized things, they didn't back then say, well, gee, this tractor cost 100 times more, but it's so much more productive, it didn't really cost you anything. The hedonic quality adjustment is, okay, because the subjectively they decide that this phone is twice as good as the last one. If the price stays the same, then the price has been cut in half. Or to say it differently, if the price doubles, but they think the quality tripled, guess what? The price went down by 50%. So they guess at how much the thing has gotten better, and they reduce the price increase by the amount they thought it got better. So but the problem is if every competing doodad, whether it's a car or a washing machine or a phone, if they all do that and the price goes up and you don't have a choice to buy the lesser one, it's really a false reference point, because the fact of the matter is it did cost you more. The fact that you got more for it is the nature of the product, but they confuse those two. So that's hedonic. So basically, the price of autos since 1970, the average auto is probably up, I don't know, 5, 6, 7-fold, and I don't remember what it is. But if you looked at what the government has said that the prices increased by, might annualize out to something to just a few percent, right? Now that's a little deceptive because over a long period of time, a couple percent start to add up, but. In any case, that's one thing that they do that's absurd. And then, of course, they wait. This data is so powerful. This is what gave us the productivity boom that Greenspan rationalized easy money policies about in the late 90s. Now, we did have a lot of productivity, and the harnessing everyone to a PC, to the Internet, has certainly changed a lot of lives and changed business in general. But nonetheless, this quality improvement hedonics, it was so big it distorted all the national accounts. In any case, another thing they do is substitution. The price of beef went up. They assume that you switched to chicken because it didn't go up. The price of chicken goes up. Maybe they think you switched to cat food. I don't know, but they make the assumption that because the price went up, you did something else, which is, there's obviously probably some of that goes on, but not to the extent they assume. Then they changed the way that the house prices are calculated to what the owner's equivalent rent would be. So in the housing bubble, even though prices were going up, drastically on housing, they concluded that the rent version of it wouldn't have been going up as much, so they suppressed it that way. There's a couple other little tricks they used, but so collectively these things are such that it'll never really register much inflation. So if you use that as your guide, now they have a couple of other things they use. They call the PCE. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but they're variations of the same theme. course, the other thing that goes on for people is like a lot of the consumer products they buy, they leave the price the same and then they shrink it down. And supposedly the BLS captures this, but it's just another form of the same thing. So anyway, this was, all of the calculations were changed in 1996 in the Boston Commission, and it was done because they wanted to look into how accurate it was, because they were worried about all of the cost of living adjustments and all the government programs were all indexed to this. And obviously, if the CPI goes up too fast, the government payouts go up too fast. So they had a bias. Now, I mean, this isn't Russia. They didn't set out to cook the books to come up with an answer, but they definitely had a bias as to what they wanted what they wanted to have come out of it, and they were largely successful. I mean, it's a joke as a statistic.
So in essence, I mean, it sounds like one of the main tricks that's being used is they're trying to adjust price as a ratio to the productivity of what it is that you're buying, or the productivity that, ostensibly it gives to you. Even though, like you're saying, the bottom line television that you can't go out and buy a television from 1960 now. So what's the point, right? Right. So they don't any price increase they look at to see if the quality of the product went up, then they can reduce the price by the amount they deem that the quality went up. And since it's all just trying to grab smoke, you can imagine you could pick any number you want, really. Are there any components of the CPI? I know it encompasses a bunch of things. Are there any components that have given somewhat of a glance into the reality of the situation, or are they all being adjusted and messed with?
No, I don't. I don't really know about all the sub details. I just know. I haven't looked at it closely in a long time because there's been no point in it. But I know what the major tricks are that suppress the price, that don't allow price increases to flow through, and so those are the main tricks that I just shared with you.
Yeah, and
the three main tricks.
Peter Schiff always says, there's a great experiment you can do on your own, which is just go back and look through old magazines and newspapers. He said they print the price right there on the front page, so there's no getting away from it. If it was 39 cents 10 years ago and it's $3.90 now, that's a 10x, right?
Yeah. That's easy to do. But the bigger point is, all this has gone on, and it hasn't really bothered people. I mean, I'm sure it bothers the average person. It hasn't bothered financial market operators at all. And when and if the psychology about inflation changes on the part of financial market operators, then they'll have a real problem, because there'll be a problem for the bond market and for the equity market. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, because that's not today's issue. I mean, at some point that will happen, but it's not going to happen right now. We're in the phase of the cycle where the Fed tried to exit, can't. Things are slowing down here and in the world, and it'll be more apparent when we get to the Q2 numbers and the guidance for the second half. And the world's kind of slowly slipping towards recession. I think the U.S. is headed in that direction. The Trump administration seems to believe its own bullshit when they talk about this 3% GDP growth from Q1, because a bunch of that was inventory building. And there's inventory issues in lots of markets. So, I think that the data is going to start to turn sour. But the problem in analyzing any of this stuff is, you've got all these, cross currents that blow through on, the Chinese trade war, the threats against Mexico, and now they've taken them down, and maybe Mexico's going to modify its behavior, maybe it isn't. So there's a lot of cross currents blowing through all this stuff.